What a surprise! No one saw it coming, because Ukrainians achieved a breakthrough in the most unexpected place. They also took Bakhmut under full fire control, and remaining Russians are at very great risk of being trapped. That is why it is no wonder so many Russian soldiers, they don't want to fight anymore, they destroy their own tanks and they run away. But more about all this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So, right here we have a Russian guy, extremely patriotic obviously, who is dancing very passionately. He loves the song and he loves just being Russian. And I mean, even though he is wearing the military uniform, he is the part of TikTok forces, I mean, literally. But, I mean, you know, his dance is kinda infectious, not gonna lie. You can actually see the passion and faith in his eyes, unfortunately, for the wrong reasons. So, yeah, let's not just bother this man and let him enjoy his life, right? Instead, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel? Because I'm trying here to be the first one on YouTube to report on extremely important news happening between Russia and Ukraine. And also, please make sure to follow my friend Fernando on Instagram, pentahydrattetratitratanata. Sorry bro, I butchered your name, because he has pretty good pictures on his page. I'm gonna leave the link to his Instagram down below. Right, and now let's jump right into the main topic of the video, Ukrainians achieving a significant breakthrough in the most unexpected place. Then we'll talk about Ukrainians also taking fire control over Bakhmut and Russians not wanting to fight, destroying their tanks and running away. And then we'll smoothly move to the south and talk about the Western military support to Ukraine. So yes, let's begin with the east, and our first stop brings us to Bakhmut, and as you can see right here, Ukrainians were able to advance closer to Klishivka, and then as we move to the north of Bakhmut, as you can see right here, Ukrainians were able to achieve a significant progress next to Yehidny and Berhivka, but unfortunately the next day, Russians took a little bit of Berhivka back. But most importantly, as you see from this map which shows us the height of the terrain, those areas located to the south of Berhivka and next to Klishivka are located on elevated positions, which basically means those territories which Ukrainians already control, they give them extraordinary view of the city of Bakhmut. And as a result of this, Ukrainians already established full fire control over Bakhmut. They see the entrances to the city, the exits, the movement of Russian forces within Bakhmut, and even sometimes inside their trenches. But most importantly is that the artillery and tanks, now they also have the extended range of their missiles. It is basically just physics. Because, I mean, if you're located at the same level as your enemy, the range of your missiles is pretty much predetermined, right? But if you're located higher than your enemy, the missile starts pretty much going at the same trajectory, but because there's still no ground behind it, below it, it just keeps falling down in the arc trajectory, allowing you to reach even more distant targets. And this applies just, for example, both to tanks and to self-propelled artillery systems called Bogdana that Ukrainians are using within Bakhmut. In addition to that, Ukrainian soldiers also do constant raids towards Bakhmut outskirts, and despite sometimes even being wounded, they still keep pressuring the Russian trenches and their positions. And just overall, according to the commander of Ukrainian forces, General Alexander Syrsky, those Russians remaining within Bakhmut are pretty much at this point trapped. And what he basically means is that Ukrainians continue to provide incredible pressure along Bakhmut flanks. They also push Russians in the Bakhmut front lines, and they also use these elevated positions to destroy fortified positions of Russians. Pretty much no escape and no place to hide anymore. And yeah, by the way, all these videos from the inside of Bakhmut of combat actions I've been showing you, this is just a small part of what is allowed on YouTube. The consequences of these attacks are very devastating for Russians, believe me. If you want to see the full versions, it will be available on my Patreon, the link is down below under still 1 week of free access. And even the British intelligence report confirms that the situation in Bakhmut for Russians is literally critical, because Russians already spent as little as 60,000 soldiers trying to capture this city. They were doing this for more than 10 months, achieving this practically minimal success. And now Ukrainians are recapturing this land and Russians do not know simply how to stop them. Because of this, the morale of the Russian Bakhmut defenders, for obvious reasons, is extremely low. They know that Russian authorities will simply not allow them to abandon this city because already so much time and effort has been spent capturing it. And once again, for the Russian military commandment and especially for Putin himself, Bakhmut is a significant victory, which means losing it, Russian people, general public, will simply not understand it. But wait, there is more, because we're always talking about Bakhmut, and while we are focusing so much of our attention on this city, Ukrainians were able to achieve a significant breakthrough in the most unexpected place, and the place I'm talking about is located to the southeast of Razdolivka. As you can see, pretty big territories were liberated in just a couple of days. And in case Ukrainians are able to achieve this success and exploit it to the far north of Bakhmut, in addition to simultaneously pushing to the north and south of this city, and then even doing frontal attacks, this will completely disrupt all the remaining logistics of Russians. They will not be able to send their reinforcements inside Bakhmut, and just like Alexander Syrsky said, the remaining Russian soldiers will be trapped and encircled within the city. And that is why it is no wonder that recently there has been more and more reports of Russian soldiers abandoning their positions, running away, maybe sometimes even destroying their military equipment, such as for example tanks, so that just Ukrainians cannot take them, seize them, and just use them against Russians. And just when you thought that Ukrainians humiliated Russian soldiers enough in Bakhmut alone, wait, they also did some activities in the rest of the east and the south of Ukraine. So let's talk about these places right now, and then just a couple of words about the Western military support to Ukraine. But first of all, we just have to make a stop in one of Russian regions called Tyumeny, because this is where Russian soldiers started driving their tank in one of the local beaches, and the Ministry of Defense of Russia, by the way, said that the beach belongs to the Ministry of Defense of Russia. And that is why this was just a training. So, I mean, just take a look at this video. This is how Russian soldiers treat their own citizens. I mean, it is no wonder the support for this war decreases overall. And then, as we go already back to Ukraine, specifically closer to the border with Belarus, Ukrainian soldiers started actively building defense structures, fortifications, and also laying mines in anticipation of potential Wagner attack from this country. Then we move closer to the east of Ukraine, and then, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, both Russians and Ukrainians were engaged in the offensive activities along Svatovo-Kreminna front line. As you can see, finally for Russians, for the very first time in several months, they were able to capture some land to the west of Kreminna. Then we have a video somewhere from Luhansk region, and as you can see right here, these are the remains of one of the most modern combat battle tanks of Russians called T-90. And ultimately, Ukrainians were able to reportedly destroy a Russian artillery firing position to the east of Spirne. And just overall, in the last 24 hours, Ukrainians were able to destroy 11 artillery units of Russians, 1 ammunition warehouse, 3 air defense systems, and 2 electronic warfare systems. And Russians, they did have their own response, which unfortunately was just once again the thing they do the best, which is attacking the residential areas. And as you can see from this video, Kramatorsk was directly hit by Russians. And well, now let's talk about the situation in the south of Ukraine, because we did have some very interesting events happening next to Antonovsky Bridge, and then finally we'll talk about the Western military support to Ukraine. And if you like this style of daily updating, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel? It does help a lot. Thank you so much. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians and Ukrainians started engaged in more combat activities along the Zaporozhye front line, especially the one in the west, and then Russians, who previously they fled away as a result of Kakhovka Dam incident, and these areas were flooded. Reportedly, the Russian soldiers started to come back to these territories. But Ukrainians, they were able to take advantage of this temporarily withdrawal, and as you can see from this map, very interesting part by the way, Ukrainians were able to take, or at least contest, the left side of Dnipro river, as you can see from this new gray zone. Because if you remember in the past, a couple of weeks ago Ukrainians were attempting to cross the river. Approximately 1 week ago, reportedly they were able to do it, and then just several days ago we started to receive new reports that they were even able to gain successful foothold on the left side of the river. Next we go to Zaporozhye region, and along one of their front lines, a Russian air defense system called Buk-M has been destroyed by Ukrainians. And then we even have this video from Melitopol, which as you can see from this map located pretty far from the front lines, and the local residents were able to report some very loud noises. Our next stop brings us to the small settlement called Robotyne, and Ukrainians were able to reportedly destroy an assault group of Russians along with their 2 tanks. And as we move to Velika Novosilka frontline, Ukrainians were able to achieve relatively successful progress to the south of these front lines, next to Pryutny, as you can see from this map, and just overall, approximately 169 square kilometers of the south is already liberated, according to the General Staff of Ukraine. But Russians had their response as well, which unfortunately you might have guessed what they did. So there was this humanitarian point in Orikhiv where local residents were getting their humanitarian support. And Russians, I don't know why, but they did attack this place as well, injuring and eliminating some civilians. But fortunately, according to Natalia Gumenyuk, she says that there is good news and hope, because the number of such shellings of Russians against southern territories in Ukraine has decreased significantly, and mainly because of 2 reasons. Reason number 1, it is because Ukrainians were successfully targeting and destroying Russian warehouses in the south, and the reason number 2 is that a lot of Russians were transported to the east of Ukraine, because this is where, according to them, is the main concentration of Ukrainian attacks. And to sum it all up, here is just a couple of words about the Western military support and then extremely important conclusion of the video. And first of all, as you might have heard over the weekend, the US approved sending cluster munition to Ukraine, which will be a game changer. Because the consequences for the Russians will be truly devastating, just based on this video alone, which I'm still not able unfortunately to show on YouTube. It is on my Patreon, the link is down below. Next we have the statement from the Turkish company which is producing drones, called Bayraktar, and they said that the construction of factory which will be producing these drones already in Ukraine has already started. And speaking about opening Western factories on the territory of Ukraine, another German company called Rheinmetall is also planning to do exactly the same in Ukraine in the near future, and they will be producing hundreds of tanks every single year. And Ukrainians, on the other hand, they also improvise and modify Western military vehicles as well, such as, for example, they use tons of steel to create additional armor for their military vehicles. And to conclude all of this, according to Mikhailo Podolyak, he says that Ukraine only needs to achieve 2 to 3 significant victories in order to start the process of, how he called it, disintegration of the Russian authorities and the Russian military. And his main statements is that Putin right now is extremely weak, especially as a result of this armed rebellion by Wagner, which happened several weeks ago. And by the way, it still might happen in the future, but at that time it will be much more powerful. Then he pretty much gives us the same confirmations that the morale of Russian soldiers is extremely low, and as soon as they see some breakthroughs by Ukrainians, especially if it's going to be close to their front lines, this is when they start absolutely losing their minds, abandoning their places, and just running away, despite the orders from their military commandment. And one of such victories which will start the process of disintegration of Russia can be, for example, victory in Bakhmut. To be honest, I personally think that yes, this might be the most significant battle, because once again Russians spent so much effort trying to capture the city, that is why losing it will be completely unacceptable for the Putin's regime. And just a couple of other significant battles, in my opinion, might happen in the south. The one maybe will go towards Melitopol, which is where Ukrainians are fighting right now in the Zaporozhye front line, and the second one might be connected with Ukrainians being able to successfully fully cross Dnipro river and liberating the rest of Kherson, which by the way will completely separate Crimean Peninsula from the rest of occupied Ukraine. But as for now, let's take it one step at a time, because after all, also according to Mikhailo Podolyak, this war will not be able to be sustained forever, because the resources of both Russia and Ukraine are obviously finite, but Ukrainians, they have the upper hand, because they do have the support of the majority of the world. And because of this, the chances of Ukrainians at winning in this war are much higher than those of Russians, especially because right now we are in the active stage of Ukrainian counteroffensive, which by the way has not reached its full speed yet, but eventually it will, especially when Ukrainians will be able to find the weak spots of Russians and breach through their defenses, where cluster munition can help a lot. So most likely this will happen very soon. If you don't want to miss it, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. The absolutely best way to support my work will be through my Patreon. You can also become my channel member or simply use a PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи. Please follow me on Instagram and please be aware there are scammers in the comments, and see you tomorrow.